Okay, so you're not gonna believe this, but in Israel they released the Lord of the Rings trilogy in theaters after 21 years, and it's perfect because Return of the King is exactly the next movie that I need to review. So I'm gonna go watch Return of the King in IMAX for the first time. Let's do this.
Okay, I was wrong. The Academy totally redeemed themselves after the debacle of the previous 2 years by not only awarding Return of the King a most deserved Best Picture award, but also by having it literally sweep the ceremony. It won every single one of the 11 Oscars it was nominated for, equaling the record for most awards held by Ben-Hur and Titanic, and also breaking Gigi's and The Last Emperor's record for biggest ever Oscar sweep, the latter being a record that will probably never be broken. There's no denying it, the 76th Academy Awards was the Peter Jackson show, and yours truly was a very happy camper.
You're giving us an incredibly overwhelming night.
So now, finally, the time has come to talk about Lord of the Rings. And I'm not gonna keep you in suspense, I'm just gonna flat out say it. The Lord of the Rings is my single favorite cinematic experience of all time, and Return of the King is my favorite chapter of the trilogy. This makes it one of the few legitimate frontrunners for being my all-time favorite film ever. Do you understand the weight of what I am saying to you right now? Can you feel the bias? Needless to say, I think this film is pretty great. Now, I contemplated on how I should approach this film in terms of reviewing it. A part of me feels like I should judge it on its own, because in the context of Best Picture winners, this was the only film in the trilogy to actually win it. So implementing the previous 2 installments into my critique of this film feels a little bit like cheating, as in, of course this film is gonna be great because it has 2 amazing films to back it up that already set up most of the characters and story. I felt like it might be unfair towards the other Best Picture winners if I judge it like this. But ultimately, I decided to do exactly that. I decided to judge it on its own, sure, but also as the climax of a trilogy. Now, you might think it's unfair, but I'd argue that this film earned the special treatment. Peter Jackson made 3 incredible films that tell one giant and cohesive story. He shot them all simultaneously, and all of them turned out amazing. Now, to make one fantastic film is hard enough. To make 2 is outrageously impressive, but to make 3 legitimate masterpieces back to back, it's something that was literally unheard of and still to this day never replicated. This is why I think that having the advantage that it has is actually a point in favor of the film and not against it. It deserves the extra credit that it gets. Also, nobody really judges this film on its own, and that's not a bad thing. I'm pretty sure even the Academy didn't. We all knew at the time that the awards the film was receiving was more for the entire trilogy as a whole and not just Return of the King itself. You knew it, I knew it, everybody knew it, and that's okay. So, Return of the King. Let's talk about it. I'm not gonna go into all the little details in this video. I'll definitely do a gigantic, in-depth analysis of the whole trilogy at some point in the future, but for now, I'll just go over the basics. Return of the King is the 3rd and final installment in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, where all the story arcs reach their climax. This is the film where we get the payoff from all of the build-up of the previous 2 installments, and it's glorious. Return of the King is an emotional thrill ride packed with action, suspense, meaningful character moments, and awe-inspiring visuals. This is the standard, the textbook example of how to finish an epic story on a high. It's the creme de la creme of satisfying conclusions. The action scenes in this movie are remarkable, some of the greatest battles I've ever seen on the silver screen, which also include the greatest horse charge in the history of film. Yes, I am finally paying off that small reference from the Cimarron video. You're welcome. Anyway, back on topic. The cinematography puts you right in the heart of the action, but it also keeps cutting to wide angles to allow us a bird's eye view of everything that's going on. My favorite shot in the whole movie is this one of the Nazgul swooping down from the sky to attack Minas Tirith. You get to see the giant orc army, you see the trebuchets firing at each other, and you can even see people in the city fleeing for their lives. It's just an epic sweeping shot that gives me goosebumps every time I see it. It's actually one of many epic sweeping goosebump-inducing shots the film has. Needless to say, the visuals in this film are stellar. Not to be outshined, however, we also get a majestic musical score that turns everything it touches to gold. It's triumphant when it needs to be, it's foreboding when it needs to be, and it's ethereal when it needs to be. It's one of the greatest, if not the greatest, musical scores I've ever heard in a movie. The world building in the film is spectacular. Just because it's the finale and it already has most of the world set up, doesn't mean the film refrains from world building itself. We get to see and go to places in Middle-earth that we haven't been to before, at least not in any meaningful way, like the grand city of kings, Minas Tirith, the terrifying lair of the giant spider Shelob, and of course, the land of darkness itself, Mordor. I love how each time the film introduces us to a new place, it takes a beat, lets the scene breathe, and allows us to fully take in the new surroundings. This helps the world of the film to truly feel alive. You don't just get to know characters, you also get to know locations, whole peoples, and history. It allows you to get invested on a much deeper level. That way, when the armies of darkness attack, you actually care. I think Return of the King does an excellent job at eliciting a sense of genuine dread and helplessness. It's hard for me to feel it now, to be honest, after experiencing this movie literally hundreds of times and already knowing what will happen, but if you look at the film objectively, I think it's quite clearly the case. There's a legitimate end-of-the-world feel to this movie, like there's no hope, like the odds are impossibly stacked against our heroes. How every single time the good guys catch a break, an even bigger obstacle shows up to spoil the party. The film is super engaging because of that. The stakes feel huge and the chances seem slim, but you still want to see our heroes prevail. Return of the King's story is epic and large-scale, but it's also very simple. It's the archetypal good versus evil story, and in my opinion, it's the greatest ever example of that. The theme of good versus evil, righteous versus wicked, and purity versus corruption is portrayed in every single element of the film, from the war itself being between peaceful humans and disgusting beasts, to the land of man literally being a shining city on a hill, and the land of Mordor being a figurative representation of hell, all the way to Frodo being a symbol of pure innocence, with the ring signifying corruption at its fundamental form. Almost all of the characters here are incredible, ranging from iconic, relatable, entertaining, and straight up badass. Aragorn's journey to fulfill his destiny and reclaim the throne of Gondor was satisfying as hell, and his scenes are a massive part of why I love this film so much. But even Aragorn doesn't compare to the heart of this film, which are the scenes of Frodo, Sam, and Gollum. These are the scenes with the most drama, the most conflict, and the most emotion. Again, I can delve into the little details for literal hours. I can't do this film or these characters justice in such a short video, but all I'll say is that the relationship between Frodo and Sam in this movie was so touching that it moved me to tears. And of course, I can't forget Gollum, a character that absolutely deserves all of the high praise that he gets, from the groundbreaking special effects that bring him to life, all the way to Andy Serkis's magnificent performance. While in The Two Towers, Gollum was a much more tragic and sympathetic character, in here, he's a straight-up despicable and nasty villain, and a symbol of how if strength fails and succumbs to weakness, it can destroy the world. The Lord of the Rings is so rich, so thematic, and so timeless that people thought that adapting it to the big screen would be impossible. But Peter Jackson, a little-known director from New Zealand who mostly made gory horror films prior, stepped up to the plate and proved everybody wrong. He didn't just turn this book into a film, he created one of the greatest cinematic achievements in film history. And of course, he created my personal favorite trilogy of all time, with Return of the King being my favorite chapter. So yeah, that's Return of the King. I love it. I love it so much. I don't know if I can conclusively call it my favorite film of all time, but there is one thing that I can say quite conclusively. The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, is my favorite Best Picture winner of all time. That's right, even more than The Godfather. Is Return of the King a flawless movie? Absolutely not. It has a fair few issues actually, like the character of Denethor, who in the theatrical version of the film comes across as way too over the top and needlessly stupid. In the extended version, we get a few extra scenes that go a long way in fleshing out his character, but without them, his stupidity feels forced. Also, the film does drag at parts, it has some pacing issues, especially in the first half and relating to Arwen's character. So it's not a perfect film. But to quote Rhett Butler, I don't give a damn. Is The Godfather a better film technically than Return of the King? Probably, but I don't care. As far as Best Picture winners are concerned, Return of the King is my special case. It's the Joker in a deck of cards. It's the one Best Picture winner that is most near and dear to my heart. So much so that I'm able to disregard all criticisms and unashamedly put it at the top where it belongs. I genuinely believe that The Return of the King is a landmark motion picture, and even though it is highly praised, I don't think it's praised enough. For example, even people who love this movie tend to criticize the multiple endings. I loved the endings. I see them as endings to an entire trilogy, not just one movie. Each of them had a purpose, each of them was satisfying, and each of them wrapped up a certain arc. When the door closes on Sam's home and the text reading "The End" pops up on the screen, I feel like the most meaningful, exciting, thrilling, emotional, and just straight up incredible cinematic experience I've ever had has reached its end at exactly the right time. You can say what you will, but for me, the choice is clear. Return of the King is the most satisfying movie I've ever seen, with incredible action, outstanding visuals, special effects that still hold up today, amazing and iconic characters, a rich world, and a thematic story. The Return of the King, for me, is hands down the greatest Best Picture winner ever made. After 30 long years, The Godfather is unseated at last. This is obviously a very personal pick for me, but this is what this list has always been about. I'd love for you to tell me what your favorite Best Picture winner is in the comments. The Return of the King is mine. It's not just my favorite film to win, it's also my favorite to win in general. I love the fact that it broke all the records and that it's the first fantasy film to receive the award. And for those reasons, it tops the list. Up next is the 77th Best Picture winner, the second film directed by Clint Eastwood to win the award, $1 Million Baby. That's it, we're done with Lord of the Rings. It's time to move on. Check back again for the next video of DB Reviews Oscar Madness Marathon and subscribe to my channel so you won't miss a thing. Thank you all very much, and let the journey continue.